Parents, Late Night Parents. Actually coming to you on an extremely late night. So it's apropos that I wanted to do a quick discussion on opioid misuse and addiction. I did an interview 4 years ago. Tony D, what's going on? 4 years ago, I did an interview at the WGBB studios with Dr. Pawan Grover. Let me get this straight for you. It was a pretty powerful interview. Talked about the opioid crisis that's happening in America, how it's complicated type of situation, and it's reached a tipping point. The U.S. is experiencing the epidemic of drug overdose, poisoning, deaths. Since 2000, the death rates from opiate drug overdoses have increased 200%. As an example, at the time of the interview, there were 52 cases of opioid overdose reported in Louisville, Kentucky in a 32-hour period. So want to introduce you to an archive interview from Dr. Pawan Grover, and we'll take it from there. This is Ted Hicks, Late Night Parents. Welcome once again to our listeners in the U.S. and those abroad. Airing from our studios, West Babylon, New York. So happy to be back here for another week with tag team partner, Richie B.
Teddy Ted.
What's up, man?
Nothing much, man. What's going on?
Nothing. Missing a member of the team.
I know. I'm like sitting over here on this side of the table, just trying to fill the space. But I am not nearly worthy and capable of filling the space of the good doctor. But I'm
not at all. A lot has happened, transpired since the last time we got together. Dr. Michelle is away this week in Arizona.
There she is.
Yes, Arizona. I'm not sure the name of the conference she was attending, but looked pretty good on social media.
Yeah, I saw a few of those pictures out there. She's out there enjoying herself. I'm sure she's also bringing some good conversation and some good information, both giving some and taking some away.
That's true.
That she'll bring back to us next time.
That's true. So in the queue tonight, we have none other than, and he's not on yet, and the big question is, will he be on?
Let's see.
Dr. Pawan Grover. We're going to talk about the opiate crisis. I used the word epidemic last week.
Yep.
The good Dr. Michelle kind of taken it back.
That right jab.
Yeah, it was just like, don't call it an epidemic. Don't call it an epidemic. I said, all right, I'm with you. But there's a lot of things going on with that situation. And I was working like last summer to try to, get a couple of people on.
Yep.
And a couple of counselors and drug counselors, and it just didn't happen. So I was happy with the fact that we have an expert on this evening to talk about it.
And your favorite term in the world, subject matter expert.
Subject matter expert.
And we have one. And this is good because, this is a situation that is not just New York. It's not just Long Island. It's not just the East Coast. It's the country and beyond. So it'll be good to be able to hear from someone who can offer some information and maybe dispel some of those myths that are out there as to what's causing this epidemic crisis issue.
And the opiate crisis in America is a complicated, multifaceted crisis, reaching a tipping point since Y2K 2000, according to the Center of Disease Control. the United States is experiencing an epidemic of drug overdose, poisoning deaths. Since 2000, the rate of deaths from opiate drug overdoses have increased 200%. As an example, a few weeks ago, there were over 52 cases of opioid overdose were reported in Louisiana, Kentucky, in a 32-hour period.
That sounds insane. I mean, that's the number of people being affected by that. If that's 52 cases also reported, I mean, overdose is overdose, but you don't know how many other cases that were out there that no one knew what the real cause was. I mean, I know this is something that affects even locally. I mean, I have neighbors who've got family members who are directly impacted by this. So it's what do we say about it? What's causing it?
And that's a great question, because I believe in the queue, he's a graduate of UMDMJ, otherwise known as Rutgers Medical School. And he did his residency in Texas Medical Center and Spine Interventional Fellowship with the world-renowned specialist, Professor Michael Cousins in Sydney, Australia, who is widely considered to be the father of interventional pain management. We'd like to welcome Dr. Grover. Doc, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys today?
Doing well, thank you. Doing well. Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well.
Doc, I got to tell you, we booked you, I think, a month in advance. You're that busy. I mean, so we are honored to have you on our little show.
No, thank you for having me on. Yeah, it's pretty shocking what you were just saying about the 52 deaths that just happened within a short amount of period. And, here's the interesting thing about it. We just go behind the headlines a little bit so we can understand what's really going on. When you look at that statistic where they say, opiate deaths have been 200%, or this number, 56 opiate overdoses, right? And the CDC gives a number like 91 people overdose in this country a day. Here's what you look at that opiate overdose. First of all, it's difficult to find the case of when somebody overdoses, what exactly the cause is, because it's different from state to state when they look at it. And when they calculate the opiate overdose, that includes prescription opiates from doctors, right? That also includes a fentanyl, which is a synthetic version of morphine. And there's two types. There's one that's prescribed by doctors. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a street version, which is actually increasing over the last few years, and we'll talk about that. A lot of overdose deaths are due to that, fentanyl, cutting it with other medications. But in the lab, you can't tell the difference between street fentanyl and prescribed fentanyl. And heroin is also included in that opiate overdose. So that number that you started the show with, the 52 deaths, a lot of that, we're assuming it's prescription overdose, but that also includes heroin. It also includes street fentanyl, right? So the real, I think, what's happening is over the last 2 years, the heroin overdoses that had quadrupled. Actually, deaths by prescription overdoses is coming down, and fentanyl is rising up. Right? And just to give you the background, now, we think all of it is due to prescription opiates because that heroin is included under the term opiate, right? Mm-hmm. And years ago, let me just tell you what happened with prescribing habits of doctors, and there is some culpability there. Years ago, it was really an issue with undertreatment of pain. Even cancer pain. A lot of people were having cancer, but they were being undertreated. So there was a big national push with national initiatives to kind of improve the treatment of pain. That's why, if you remember, they made the pain score like a fifth vital sign, in addition to blood pressure and heart rate. And so what happened then? The pendulum swung the other way. We started medicine overprescribed medication, right? And that's led to some of the problems that are happening now. But over the last few years, because of the awareness of the opioid crisis, the Vicodin, which was a very easily prescribed medication called on the phone, they changed the classification of that several years ago. So this is why you'll see the prescription opiates coming down, and it's this heroin that's kind of really, I think, getting really large. And here's the thing about heroin. Years ago, let's just talk about the heroin for a second, because it's fascinating. Years ago, the heroin that was on the street was sticky and tar-like, and then people would inject it, like you've seen on these movies and TVs. A new heroin that's kind of hit the market, it's can be snorted, so it kind of takes away the deterrent. People are still using needles, but because of this new heroin, people can snort it, which takes away the deterrent of needles, right? Nobody likes needles. And it's so strong, this is really what's causing a lot of the overdoses. And a lot of drug dealers, what they're doing is they're cutting this heroin with fentanyl, which is a synthetic morphine type of drug. Actually, there's like, meth clinics, remember Breaking Bad, where they had all these meth clinics, and the Walter White, because he was a chemist, he made a 96% pure version of meth. So that's kind of the equivalent of what's happening on the street with this heroin, right? There's actually, instead of meth clinics now, they have fentanyl clinics. And believe it or not, they order the stuff and they get it overseas in the mail, the basic components, because the regular mail doesn't track where it's sent from. So these fentanyl clinics are popping up all over. And what's happening is they're cutting. There was a lady recently that was in the news. She was getting a street Xanax, right? And so she got the Xanax, and it was cut with this fentanyl, and she died immediately. And it's kind of counterintuitive. Why would drug dealers try to kill off their customers? But because the science is not very clear and it's very difficult, that's why there's no quality control. So a lot of these deaths that you're seeing, it's from the heroin and being cut with this fentanyl.
So doctor, I have a question. I'm just wondering, is there a difference as far as, I guess, from, I'll say, a lethality standpoint between the older heroin, like you said, the old black tar that we're familiar with seeing so much on TV, and the fentanyl and the new heroin?
Yes, the new heroin is much more dangerous. It's very pure, it's very potent, and it's going to be. That's why we can't really fix this heroin crisis. We need more rehab. We need more Narcan. But that's why you're seeing such a. We never, like 52 deaths in a short amount of period because this new stuff on the market. So it's very potent. So it is much more lethal than before. And here's an interesting thing, just the history of where this heroin comes from. So of course, it comes from South America, Mexico, Southeast Asia. But what the 90% producer globally of heroin is actually from Afghanistan. And in Canada, they're having a huge problem with that because 90% of their heroin is from Afghanistan. So we need to kind of take some of those sources out. Now, in terms of for parents, right, one of the things that they can really control, because one of the overdose deaths is from kids, the young kids getting into their medications. And teenagers, a lot of people, they get started on other drugs from family and friends. So the one thing there's two things that you can take right now, because all this sounds pretty grim, but two things that you can take is, one is you've got to lock up your medications from your kids. And that's not, you got to put some effort into it, because logistically you're going to be taking it, so you have to get some sort of safe or some sort of condition, because that is one issue that you can take action yourself to prevent, right? The second is some of the accidental overdoses are if you're legitimately taking pain medications, if you mix it with benzodiazepine or alcohol, or this other cross reaction from a sedative effect from another medication, you can accidentally overdose. So if for parents out there, if you can do those two things, you'd make a direct impact in some of the numbers that we're seeing.
And this is Ted Hicks from Late Night Parents, along with Rich Valdez. We're speaking with Dr. Pawan Grover about the opiate crisis that's happening today. Doc, I want to read a statement to you. Over 116 million Americans suffer from chronic pain, and treating that pain costs over $635 billion annually in the U.S. alone. And I'm looking for answers to the centuries-old question: why must we feel pain?
Okay, this is a great question, Ted. And this is a lot of people don't have understanding. Let me explain it this way. So we know that the reason the body has an acute pain response or a pain network is a survival mechanism, right? You put your hand near a fire, so you withdraw your hand immediately. That saves your arm from getting burned. What we couldn't understand for the longest time is that when people develop chronic pain, right, pain that lasts for years or months, it made no sense why the body actually produces that, because it's got no positive effect. You have pain down one leg, you start walking with a tilt, affects your back, you can't exercise, your muscles get weak. And actually, the body doesn't know the difference between physical stress and mental stress. So pain actually is like a stress response. That's why blood pressure goes up. And it actually releases cortisol, which starts to break down tissues and your immune system. So it made no sense as to why the body produces a chronic pain situation. And what we learned is that the chronic pain situation is kind of something gone wrong, sometimes in the messaging, right? So like if you have a car alarm, and when it goes kind of wacky and it just starts going off without any sort of thing, we have to take that's what's really happening with chronic pain. And so, just toughing it out is not the answer, because we create all these other circumstances that happen because of lack of activity. And there's actually two things that medicine currently does wrong in terms of managing pain. I mean, narcotics are an option when nothing else works, and it's only, I think, you have to use really common sense and caution with that. But there's two big mistakes that we make. So now you understand, what chronic pain reason that we have it, and you've got to kind of reverse it. And we rely too much on MRIs or X-rays, right? And then we get an MRI and the doctor says that's a bulging disc. So we try to then operate too much on it. And, what we need to know is that MRIs and X-rays are a first step, but they never actually show the true cause of pain, because most people have more than one finding on the MRI. So there's a whole process of how to get the right diagnosis. But currently the way we do it, it's not really effective. You go, try physical therapy for a month, and a lot of times it goes away. Otherwise, you get a series of 3 epidural injections, which is common, which is just a wide shot of steroids. The problem is it doesn't tell you where the pain is. If that fails, then you go on kind of a surgical route, and sometimes surgery is necessary. But we also make the mistake is that we treat chronic pain like it's an acute pain situation. So that means we have to go there and fix something structurally, and it might not be a structural issue. It's just these nerve fibers that are going off. So I think that's two of the things in terms of why we have so much chronic pain issues in this country.
When you're mentioning now the initial issue with those who are self-medicating to take this, to take these substances to eliminate pain. But what about those who are taking the substances to get high?
So there's a lot of this is also, you see these statistics from the CDC that most people who get addicted to heroin, who's on prescription drugs, 3 or 4 is some of the numbers they tout. There are people who have an addictive personality, and they're going to try to seek drugs to get high, right? And actually, in that statistic, 75% of the people who did get hooked on heroin, they got prescription overdoses from family or a friend, or they bought it on the street, right? So there's kind of an implication that they're pain patients, and actually they're a set of patients that have true pain and are being managed appropriately. They don't really develop those kind of things. So you got to keep the person that's looking for drugs, and they go to these pill mills, which are illegitimate. They're trying to shut that down, where basically you have centers which are selling prescriptions for cash, and those are contributing to the problem. And here's another thing, though, Ted, that's very interesting is as the numbers, as like the CDC that control, they change the Vicodin, doctors are no more aware. They're actually, a lot of doctors are scared to write medications because they're being vilified. So they're just kind of pulling back, and some of that is good. But, you don't want to hurt the patients that are taking it legitimately. The CDC also, the federal regulations decreased the supply of prescriptions in 2012, right? And plus with closing down these clinics. So the street value of diverted brain prescriptions shot up, like skyrocketed. And that's why people started switching to this new heroin, which was more available and cheaper. So, stopping one's kind of ratcheted up the other. So it's a very complicated crisis. But, we need to do better control of pain. And if you're a doctor that's prescribing it legitimately, we've got to check drug tests to make sure that people are complying, make sure that they're not getting, we didn't have tools like this where we could check to see if somebody's taking medication. So, but we also got to make sure that we don't, go swing the pendulum back the other way, so that doctors are afraid to write, and we're actually causing more of that statistic you just told me about people suffering with pain.
Doc, one of our final questions, is there any rhyme or reason to psychological pain and its relationship to physical pain?
Yes. Well, so there's three ways to there are there is a psychological component to pain issues. Some of it is as a result of it, like depression, anxiety. And then there is, sometimes that's the primary problem. People are depressed, and, if you're an escapism, right? So drugs are an escapism from the depression or anxiety that you're having, and it takes kind of a professional to sort that out and make sure that, the person that's addicted or has looking at for psychological reasons, you're not feeding that habit, giving them, pain medications. But it depends on the patient, so I can't put it in one category. There is legitimate people who have nothing else can be done, and they're managed on medications, and they don't actually help their depression and anxiety because they're able to do more, they're not in constant pain. So you have to differentiate what's primary, the pain or the psychological issue. And sometimes it's complicated, and you have pain patients that also get addicted. So it needs to be approached with caution, is what I'm saying.
Gotcha. Doc, want to thank you so much, Dr. Pawan Grover, for joining us. Hey, Doc, could you tell us the best ways to get in contact with you? If there's any, if our listeners want to follow up with you on social media?
Sure. Yeah, well, I don't actually have anything to sell. I got no books, but if you want information, my medical website's got a lot of educational videos about how to diagnose pain and chronic pain. That's innovaspine.net, INOVO spine.net. I love patient advocacy, so I pretty much that's the information is what I want to try to contribute on my side.
Definitely. Want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. Thank you, and we hope to be in touch with you very soon again.
Yeah, invite me again. I would love to come and talk to you again. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Doc. Have a great day. That was very informative.
Very, very, very. And I've been waiting, as I told you, I was waiting for a while for to get the right guest on here.
Right.
But I think we outdid ourselves that time.
You outdid.
And just like that, that's a wrap. Want to thank you again. I hope you enjoy the interview. For the people that watch it on a replay, Dr. Pawan Grover, great person, great guest in the archives. Thanks again, folks.